Welcome, welcome. So first of all, how many of you are a startup founder or in the process of building a startup? And who wants some government funding to help you do that? Okay, seems like we are in the right place. Okay, we'll get started. But before we do so, I just want to quickly thank UTS Startups for having us today. They don't just provide, a roof above us. They actually create some of the most meaningful and high participation events in Sydney, like the one that you're going to experience today. And everything they do here is geared towards helping startups grow and improve. So if you haven't engaged with any of the programs yet, I highly recommend you to do so. Okay. And I also want to give a massive personal shout out to the team behind the scenes that actually make it happen today. Alex, Victoria, Sharon, Jane, and Mary, and all the UTF staff at the back. Thank you. Thank you. Right. It's good to see some familiar faces here today, and also some new faces. And for those who don't know me already, my name is Jonathan Chak. I'm very, very honored to be here today. Just a very quick background. I started off as a teenager entrepreneur back in the early 2000s. I've built multiple businesses, and the relevant point is I've raised both private capital and got government grant for my own businesses. And then subsequently, I started mentoring other founders in the ecosystem. Throughout the last decade, I have helped over 1,000 founders on their journey, various parts of their journey: ideation, growth, product, capital raising, government grants, so on and so forth. And despite being an entrepreneur, interestingly, I actually spent 6 years with government. Don't know how I got it there, but I did. I spent a couple of years with the New South Wales government as an advisor for the back then MVP grant program, and then subsequently 3 years with the federal government on the accelerating commercialization. And so I was very privileged to be a founder, sitting on this side of the table, accessing funding, and then subsequently on the other side of the table, assessing applications and helping founders, doing so in reciprocal. And currently, I'm just an independent consultant, helping various different founders on their journey. And I've had, very, very humbly, a lot of success with securing funding for many different companies on very competitive programs like the previous Boosting Female Founders program, obviously the MVP Ventures program that we're going to talk about today, and the Industry Growth program. Very quickly, just a disclaimer, because funny enough, a lot of people, when I talk about grants, they thought I was from the government, but I'm not. So just a very quick disclaimer, I'm an independent consultant. I'm in no way affiliated to any government department, and all the materials that are presented to you today and all the opinions are solely mine. Very quick agenda. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but we'll go quickly. And at the end of the day, we're going to open it up for Q&A. But I just want to share with you an overview of the program, just some nuances that I want to point out to every founder. Perhaps those are critical points which a lot of people might miss. And then because the program has been running for a couple of years, and for this financial year has already gone through 2 rounds, and I have been working with a lot of founders who have been successful and also not so successful in round 1 and round 2. I just want to share all of those common mistakes that I've seen so that we don't get tripped up subsequently in this round 3. And then I'm going to round off it with a couple of strategies that you can take on board to strengthen your application and avoid some of the mistakes that people are making. And finally, I'm just going to share with you a couple of things how you can get help with your application, as we've only got 14 days left to the deadline of round 3. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about the overall program mechanics. The New South Wales government has allocated $3 million per financial year on this program, and they run 3 rounds during the financial year, which means roughly they're going to allocate $1 million for each round. So you can do the math, right? And that's quite important because ultimately, give or take, there's only 20 or so companies that are going to get funded for each round. round because of the budget that has been allocated, right? And the grant funding is between $20,000 to up to $75,000, depends on which stream you qualify for, and we're going to deep dive into the stream qualification later on because that's one of the most critical points and one of the common areas where I see founders trip over. And it targets product from a technology readiness level of 3 to 9, which means it's predominantly pre-market, and you are kind of developing the product from a commercialization lens, working with partners, customers, whatnot. And as I said, round 3 closes 10th of April. We've only got 14 days, so we better hurry up and get us going. Right. And I want to share with you the assessment process because it's not communicated really well, or on the flip side, the market doesn't kind of read or interpret it the way we should. But it starts from the department put the guidelines out, put programs out. It's up to you guys in the market to read and interpret it, and then you go online. Create an application, submit it, and that's it, right? Okay, so that's the premise of how it started. And then once a round is closed, however many applications goes into the pipeline, it goes through different steps, predominantly 3 steps. The first one is eligibility check, and that's purely just looking at compliance and eligibility. And if you don't pass some of those compliance gates, then you don't go further. You get rejected immediately, which means all the hard work that you've put in putting together your proposal, your business case, whatnot, doesn't get read at all. Okay, so that's the first step. And if you pass all of the eligibility criteria, you're compliant, then you move to what they call the competitive assessment. And roughly in the last couple of rounds, I would imagine, anecdotally, maybe half of the people get actually rejected on eligibility, and only half of them actually move to competitive assessment. And then they score it based on the competitive assessment criteria. They've probably got a rubric of some sort, and then they score you against those 3 criteria. And for those that scores a particular score, will go to the panel review. Okay, it could be 60% or 70% or whatever it is. So those would be the ones that are considered competitive, and it goes to panel review. But it doesn't mean all of those are going to get the money because there's only, roughly, give or take, $1 million per round. Then they rank it. The top 20, 22, 25 of them gets the money, and the rest, unfortunately, missed out. So that's kind of the assessment process. I just want to bring that to your attention because some of the things, especially the common mistakes that I've seen, are highly relevant to the process. Okay, in a nutshell, what's required from you, and I would always suggest founders to look at it from an eligibility perspective and then a competitive perspective, because they're 2 different things. A lot of founders come to me and say, "Oh, do you think we are suitable for the grant?" And I say, looking at your company structure, yeah, you are eligible, but whether you're going to be competitive or not is 2 different aspects to it. But roughly, with eligibility, it's a hard line, yes or no. You submit your ASIC record, you provide contribution evidence, you provide your company financials, accounting declarations. Those are hard line, black and white. You either do it or you don't do it, or you either compliant or you're not compliant, right? And then with competitive assessment, it is broken down into 3 areas. Innovation, which is why you're better, why you're different, and commercialization, is there actually a market there? Who says they want to pay for it? Who's the customer? How are you going to distribute it, right? And deliverability is about whether that is a logical project, because going back to the objectives of the program, it says is to bring a piece of IP or technology up the technology readiness scale. So the project needs to logically reflect that. Are you going from 4 to 5? Or is it an unreasonable project where you think you can spend $100,000 and take it from 3 to 9, right? So they look at those kind of things. And then obviously it's the team capability, your background, what we call the founder problem fit. So that's what required from you from a grant application perspective. Now let's dive into. Sorry, I'm going really quickly because we've only got so much time. Some common mistakes made by founders. The first one is stream 1 or stream 2 or neither. Neither means you're not eligible, right? So the very, very baseline is that you have a New South Wales ABN, and your registered office and principal place of business needs to be in New South Wales. Okay, and the majority of the office holders, so these are very specific ASIC terms, right? And you can see all of this in your ASIC record. That's why you should always judge it according to the ASIC record printout. Because I've got founders coming to me and say, hey, we are in the New South Wales business, but then we got rejected. And then when they show me the ASIC record, and they say, hey, a couple of your directors actually lives in Victoria. So, little things like that, we just need to be very careful about it, because when founders, usually when they start thinking about an application, they talk about their business and all that, and our strategy, our tech, and all that, and little things like that can just throw you off. But we got to be diligent about it. And then the most confusing part, or should I say, a lot of founders trip over because they thought they were Stream 2, so they in the application they applied for Stream 2. But essentially they're only qualified for Stream 1, but they didn't know. They thought they were, and they got rejected. So in Stream 2, it's a new mechanism that came out last year, where they want to support specific groups of founders to be able to better access the program's funding. Okay, so Stream 1, one of the substreams in Stream 1 is female-led, and it's got a list of things where the majority of the office holders needs to be female, the majority shareholding needs to be female, and nuances like, what if you have a VC invested in you? So it's a ABC VC Fund 1 trust or something like that, right? That would automatically be considered 50-50 female-male. Like, you can't go dig deep into their trust deeds and then look at every single LP. That's just not possible, right? And similarly with corporate shareholders, like you have a company holding certain shares, you would have to look at the ASIC record of the corporate shareholder to see if there are subsequent, ultimately it's just like what the bank does with KYC and AML. You have to find the individual beneficiary. If it goes too many layers down, then forget about it. Just assume that is 50-50, then you'll be safe, right? And one very critical point is majority is 51%. So I'll give you a real example. One of the founders, they have 2 directors and a secretary. So there's a female director, there's a male director, and then the same female director serves as the secretary as well. That's a very common corporate structure, right? And she got rejected for Stream 2. And she thought, we've got 3 unique positions where 2 of them are female, but then what the guidelines actually is interpret is 2 unique persons holding office holders' positions. So we just got to be careful about that. And I even got some of my lawyer and accountant friends misinterpret that as well. But if it is what it is, I guess my responsibility is just to share those with you so we don't get tripped over there. Yeah. So that's Stream 2, and regional is a substream of Stream 2 as well, and they have very clear definitions of what regional New South Wales is, and I won't go into details on it. But Newcastle and Wollongong are not, so it's to be further away. But again, you need to have majority of office holders residing in a regional address more than 6 months before prior to your submission. First Nations is the last substream for Stream 2. That's a clear cut, because if you are a First Nations corporation, you would have got the relevant registrations and documentation, and that would be a very, very easy one. Yeah, but the takeaway from this particular mistake, majority is 51% and over. Okay, co-contribution evidence. Again, at the time of submission, you need to demonstrate that you have the financial capacity to fund the rest of the project. Okay, most people opt for the maximum grant amount. So that would equate to $100,000 project, and if you're Stream 1, you can apply for $50,000 worth of funding, and if you're Stream 2, $75,000, which means from a match funding perspective for Stream 1, you need to provide $50,000 as match funding and $25,000 for Stream 2. And at the point of application, you need to provide either only 2 evidence are accepted. Official bank statement showing a balance of more than $50,000 or whatever your match funding needs to be, or a letter from the bank with a proof of balance. And it's non-negotiable. I've got another founder just called me yesterday and said, oh, we've got rejected from round 2. And I go, why? And he said, we are non-compliant. And I asked him, send me your asset record, send me your bank statement. Those are the only 2 things I need to see to verify that whether they are assuming something or not. And interestingly, they did not provide anything from the bank, but a letter from an investor, which it's not compliant. If it's not compliant, it's not compliant, and you can't argue about that. Okay, so that's co-contribution evidence, and yep.
Sorry, just to interrupt you. If you're saying that the co-contribution is readily available, why does it have to be in the same BSB or account number? Can't it be in, say, a separate account or a savings account or something like that? If that's still valid?
I don't know why they made that decision, but that's how I interpret the guidelines. So that's what they required. Yeah, and if I'm a founder, I go apply for it, I wouldn't go argue with them. Because
I'm not saying you do,
yeah.
I'm just saying it seems odd.
It might seem odd, but yeah, that's the rule. Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I do have a lot of founders come back to me after they got rejected, and they start to argue about these things. And I said, I wouldn't spend those time arguing with them because they've listed the rules there, and we just have to be compliant. That's all. If we want the money, yeah.
That's the rules. I mean,
Yeah.
It just seems bizarre.
Yeah. So that would be. I guess that would be a question to discuss with relevant policymakers. Yeah, but probably not in this room. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Sure.
clarify.
No worries.
You could shift the money into the company bank account and show the bank statement. And presumably after the application, you take the money back and give it to the founder or whoever.
Okay, moving on. ADI, and they were very specific about who you need to bank with for the co-contribution evidence to be compliant. And because a lot of startups use Wallex or Wise, which is more modern fintech solutions for startups, it makes sense. Unfortunately, it's not compliant. So they have a list of what ADI means on their publicly available information. So just make sure you're banking with the right institution. Okay, so that's that. Company financials. I think how I interpret it is the premise of providing financials is for the department to verify whether you were turning over more than $400,000 per year in the last 3 financial years. I think that's all it is, because that's one of the definition of the eligible companies that they want to fund, and less than 10 FTEs. Those are the rules. So common pitfalls I observed is the founder just go on zero and export P&Ls and balance sheets and whatnot, and then just package it up and send it over. But they require statutory accounts. So make sure you work with your accountants very early to get those sorted. Otherwise, you get tripped over. Yes.
Hi. How can you prove the number of FTEs on your statutory accounts?
Yep. They require you to provide an accountant's declaration, and there is tick box in the declaration from the accountant explicitly saying that I verify that this company hired less than 10 FTEs.
Okay, so in addition to last 3 years' financial accounts, you have to have a letter saying, from your accountant.
There's a template online which you can download, and you get your accountant to tick, sign it. Yep, that's it.
Oh, okay, great,
yeah.
Thank you.
So they do have a template, absolutely. Okay, going back to my point about the assessment process, why it is relevant, because if your application will be rejected immediately at eligibility stage if any of those things that we talked about are off. Okay, now let's talk about some. Yes?
A quick question. So for the 20 successful business each round, is there any divide between the 3 streams?
No, it's purely ranked.
So when you pass the eligibility, and then it's purely, everybody on the same starting line for the competitive
I would imagine
analysis.
so, yeah.
Okay.
I would imagine so, yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right.
With the financial statements, because we've got a company with a turnover less than 400,000, an accountant will often not prepare statutory accounts because of the cost involved, right? So the basis for the tax return becomes the zero or MYOB printout. So you're saying you would have to go to the accountant and physically get statutory.
Take it as an administration cost of application.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So thanks for explaining some of the pitfalls. I think that really helps. The question that I had is the co-contribution evidence that you talked about. If, for example, if a founder is applying for $50,000 grant, which is the maximum limit in Stream 1, does that mean they have to show 50,000 as the
match funding at the point of application?
Got it. Okay. So that means that in total, the funder would end up with 100 grand towards the end.
You need to spend 100 grand if you get approved. Yes.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. It does not come across that way in the grant application.
Really?
Yes. I am at that stage, and it does not come across at all. So the way I interpreted was that if I'm applying for $50,000, I need to show 25,000 in the bank account. That's how I interpreted. So it's not very clear. But thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's one-to-one matching. Yeah.
Can we demonstrate $50,000 of expenditure rather than $50,000 cash in the bank?
No. Yeah, so it's a hard rule. You need to have $50,000 worth of cash demonstrated either in a bank statement or a letter of proof of balance. Yes?
If the project is a $50,000 total project budget,
then
and
you
you
only
have
need to-
$25,000 in your bank account, then you ask for a $25 grant.
Very good
That's
point. Yes,
possible.
that's exactly how it works. Cool. Good to see engagement. Good to see people asking questions and not shy about it. Okay, next section I want to just briefly go through some of the other things that I see as common pitfalls, and I'll go through it really quickly. You guys probably know a lot of these as well. Just putting my assessor hat on because I have looked at over 500-600 applications previously, and sometimes you can really smell the sense of entitlement when it comes to government grant. You don't get that in an investor pitch session, but you will get some of these. And please don't do it. It's almost like I have an idea, but I don't have money to build it, so the government should fund me to build it. Please don't do that. We're building a business here, and it's actually very serious stuff where the government, on behalf of taxpayers, are actually allocating taxpayers' dollars into various buckets of whatever areas driven by policy, and they do have a responsibility, and a very, very high responsibility in how those money are spent. So unfortunately, there are a lot of great ideas and great projects that might not get funded just because not because it's not a good idea, but it might not fit into the premise of various different programs, not just exclusively to this one. And as an entrepreneur, a lot of us we like focusing on technical details. We talk about how this is built, how this is if this is science, we want to tell you all about the science. But it's best not to use a lot of jargon because the average person just can't understand it, like assessor, investors alike. That's not what they are looking for because and particularly this is a commercialization grant. So all the technicalities and the innovations should all tie back into why there is a market and what kind of problem we're solving and why people are actually paying for it. So because of some kind of different ways of putting things together, or you have invented certain new technological breakthrough which enable a market that has not been existent previously, well, that would be a better narrative. And straight following on from that point is forgetting who the audience is. The audience is an assessor. chances are they've probably not been involved in the industry that you are operating in, and you know so much about it because you've probably spent 10, 20 years all your lives into this baby of yours, right? And when you talk about your business, and this is very common for a lot of entrepreneurs, and myself included, we get too excited about all the things, and you go in the weeds, and you forgot the audience have no context and background of what that is about. So our job is to really explain, articulate, substantiate, rather than pushing something down people's throat. And yeah, that one's just I think I'm repeating myself. A tech or product looking for a market, again, is a commercialization grant. So the product is important, the innovation is important, but it needs to be tied back into where the market is. What's the distribution? Why are people willing to pay for it? And other common red flags I've seen, people are proud in saying, we've got a lot of people interested, and we haven't even done any marketing yet. You hear that a lot, like as an investor, as an assessor, as a mentor. I hear a lot of that in the ecosystem. But interest does not mean market validation, and a good commercialization proposal usually has some kind of evidence demonstrating market validation, which is, do they really have that problem? Even if they do they have a budget to pay for it? And is the motivation big enough to change? Because sometimes people are so in the weeds of their day-to-day, they know there's a problem, they even have the budget to do it, but they just can't change because the cost of changing is just too high, right? I've got a previous client that I consulted for. They consult for a major corporation in Australia. And they've identified, because of their invention, and they've implemented the solution as a pilot into this massive corporation. And immediately they can alleviate about $20 million per year for that company. They didn't do it because that $20 million were spent as a result of someone in another business unit, and they wouldn't approve it. They wouldn't approve the change, because if they do, that whole business unit is going to go. So these are the kind of things that, as an assessor, I would be really interested to understand how your solution and what are the engagement between you and your customers and your distributors have already engaged to really get down to the point where, okay, they really have that problem and they want to pay for it and they would do anything to make a change, right? And if there are any blockers, that's the risk and mitigation part of it. I won't go into the other ones, like no competition. That's a pretty obvious one. You would see people saying there's no competition, but whether you like it or not, there will always be. It just means that you haven't really understand your customer. Okay, quick strategies to boost your success rate. Yes?
Are there any categories that are not funded? So, for example, defense, pharmaceuticals, financial technologies that
we'll get to that.
Yeah,
we will get to that, yes. There's our industry policy mission alignment element in the grant program. We'll go into that in more detail, yeah, which is 2 slides more. Okay, strategies to boost your success. Compliance, as you can probably tell, it's a big part of it. That's the first gate that you need to hop through, yeah. So the asset record, make sure you have to pick the right stream, the co-contribution evidence, bank statement or a letter from the right ADI bank, and financials, accountant's declaration. You have all of that well in advance. Then you are putting your best foot forward. Letters of intent. We haven't really talked about this too much, but it's actually a prerequisite. It's a required document that you need to attach as part of the application. And this is your opportunity to provide evidence and substantiate all the things that you talk about, your innovation, your commercialization strategy, the market size, whether the customer has a motivation to buy, whether they have a budget, all of that you can put together a narrative, a business case in your response as you go through the application form, but where's the evidence? And letters of support are the best case scenario, especially if the company that is providing you the letter of support is a very credible one or a very well-known one, right? The bigger the better, of course. But every business is different. But by and large, I would use, because they allow maximum of 2 letters of support, I would usually, depending on your business again, I would usually strategically use one for my end-paying customer, and then another one, perhaps a distribution partner or a strategic partner that can get you into a lot of these customers. Then you would have the best of both worlds, demonstrating not only we have the consensus or an alignment with the end-paying customers, verifying that the problem is real, they have got a budget, and they really have to move very quickly, but also another entity validating that you can actually reach your customer at scale, right? Not just knocking on the doors and doing sales one by one. So letters of intent, I think that's a really good way to strengthen and pull the whole application together. Commercialization, the only thing I would talk about here is the market size. Yes?
My question is that if one of the letters is from an end-paying customer, second that you mentioned was from a partner, can that be a development partner, someone who's helping build that technology, say if they've got expertise in that side of the industry, for example, hardware development. So can they be one of those letters of intent?
There's no rules around who you ask for. It's a matter of strength, right? Okay. And considering that is a commercialization ground, and again, every business is different. If there is significant value that the hardware developer can provide in kind of validating what the problem is, but ultimately, if they're not the paying customers and they're not the one getting you to the customers, then you would have to have a very strong argument in why that is relevant.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Further to that, you mentioned about the customer, so that would be a good thing to add. How do you validate authenticity? Like, how do we just get a customer to write a letter? Is it an email? How can you define whether it's real?
Okay. It's an honest system, and you sign a secretary declaration at the end of your submission. So it's on you as a founder to provide lawful information. And as the artifact itself, ideally you have the letter written in the customer's or your partner's letterhead, have a personnel signed, dated, and have their contact details in there, just in case if there are any due diligence required, then they can give them a call. Market size, TAM, SAM, SOM, that's a funny one. I've seen a lot of proposals where they just go onto IBI's world and grab a number and say, hey, this is a $3 trillion industry. And that's really meaningless. Okay, how we actually look at TAM, SAM, SOM, and it's such a VC thing because they want to see they are looking at the right ventures that can return potentially at least $1 billion valuation company. So they need to be able to tap into a really, really big market size. But from a business perspective, it's also very, very useful in understanding who you're dealing with. Like that really tells me, if I put my investor and assessor hat on, I would be looking for things like, have you really decoded the supply chain of who you're dealing with? Do you know like the unit economics of what does that mean to them? Potentially how much are you going to charge them? Let's say, for example, if you're going to charge someone $1,000 a year, and you've got 1 million of these people in your pipeline, then there's an absolute amount of value that you can derive from it, right? And that would be a really good way as a bottom-up analysis of where your SOM is, and then you can go back up and say, okay, we target like our TAM is all of these this profile of a customer in the top 20 world's economy, because they have they share these kind of similarities, et cetera, in jurisdiction, regulations, whatnot, and then you narrow it down to perhaps in an SAM scenario, it's English-speaking background, so that you don't have to do a lot more localization, and that's really where your firm's focus in, and then you come up with a number of that, and then narrow it down to the SOM, where is an immediate pipeline of X, where you know exactly how much they're going to pay you, and you use some kind of lifetime value to calculate your potential SOM that you're actually tapping into. Instead of, healthcare is a $20 trillion market. Yep. Now, industry alignment. That's to answer your question about are there any sectors that they do not fund? Okay, they did not put it that way. So what they're saying is you can put through a proposal, and as part of competitive assessment criteria, note here, it's not eligibility, it's competitive assessment criteria, you have to demonstrate how your project is aligned with one of the 3 New South Wales industry policy missions, okay? And it's a competitive criteria, which means if you score 0 in that, it does not fail you in not being eligible. They will still look at your application. They will still rank all the other things like innovation, commercialization, deliverability, and all of that. It's just one of the criteria. Okay, and the 3 policy missions are housing. I think it's affordable housing, net zero and energy transition, and also local manufacturing. And quite frankly, not every business fits into those 3 categories directly, or you don't operate. Like some do. Many companies do, but many don't as well. So I do encourage you to look at those 2 documents, which is the first one is the actual New South Wales industry policy document. And then the next one is a higher level, broader kind of innovation blueprint. So what you can look in there is search for keywords that are related to your industry and the line of work that you're working on to see if there are any correlations or anything that they've mentioned. So I've got an example here where the customer, the client is in health tech, and doesn't fit into the first 3 major policy missions, but somehow in the innovation blueprint, this is an exact excerpt in the blueprint. So I extracted that and built a narrative around it. Or let's say you are a supply chain efficiency software, and your target audience can be broad because anyone in supply chain requires supply chain solutions can use it. But you can frame it around, as part of my SOM, because of local partners, I can particularly help builders and the construction industry to procure prefab housing components more easily and more effectively from overseas vendors, because we don't have enough of those vendors in Australia, and international procurement is convoluted, and this is how we help them. Look, I'm just making it up on the fly, okay? But that's the kind of mindset or framework that you can use to see if you can surface some of the areas that the New South Wales government is looking for. Does that kind of answer your question?
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So the category that I'm interested in falls into housing and affordable housing. It is a financial technology product. I would require a financial services license to offer this to the public.
Yep.
Does that preclude me? Is regulated fintech or banking products excluded?
It does not preclude you, no.
Okay, thank you.
So I was just looking through one of your points regarding innovation manufacturing in Australia. Regarding base level manufacturing, say if you're manufacturing motors or like drone parts overseas, like in China, and if you do all of the assembly up in like Newcastle or somewhere in New South Wales, would that count in one of the frameworks you mentioned? Or one
Without
of
more context with your business, I can't make comments on that. But it's up to you to make the case in how you're aligning. And I would suggest everyone to read the guidelines and the policy document, because they have specific targets. You have to make a case on how you're going to move a needle. Let's say decarbonization. as a direct result of your solution, how much carbon emission are you eliminating each year in the next 24 months or in the next 5 years? Like if you can arrive at that, and obviously there are a lot of assumptions and there are a lot of triangulations, but that's probably the task that you have to do. So in terms of manufacturing, it could be in a particular sector. Why is there a gap in our supply chain? I use the battery manufacturing as an example. We dig up a lot of cobalt and critical minerals, but then all of that needs to be sent overseas for refinery before it can be made into cathodes. So even if we have cathodes manufactured here, we still have to go overseas and repurchase the minerals that has been refined and send it back to our country to do. And if your solution happens to be a new technology that can do the refinery onshore, that's a really good fit, right? From that perspective. Yeah, so just as an example, and again, without knowing too much about your individual business, it's really hard to give you advice, but that's the general principle of what we're talking about here.
Thank you.
At the back.
Sorry, just to clarify again. So you mentioned the industry policy, the three main things that you need to align with. Let's say you don't align with whatever your solution is not those three, but the innovation blueprint that you have, you align with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it would be a scoring thing. Like you probably won't score full marks.
No.
Yeah, but at what degree? Is it a 1? Is it a 2? Is it a 3? I don't know.
Sure, but you're not. But I just want to confirm that if you don't have one of those three industries, and you're still sort of aligned innovatively with the blueprint, that still allows you to progress. Does that make sense?
I would say you still make a case for it.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I mentioned, this particular industry alignment is one sub-bullet point under commercialization as a competitive assessment criteria, but not a hard rule eligibility criteria. It's not black and white. So this one, even if, as I said, even if you score 0, hypothetically, you score 0 and you score full marks on all the other elements, you might still be competitive, right? But it depends on how their rubrics actually work. Okay, how are we going with time? Okay, I think we'll just skip that. I think we have already talked about that. Just to wrap up a little bit about what we've talked about, I think use common sense, simple language, respect the rules. Just do what they ask you to from a compliance perspective. And I think our job is to explain, articulate, and substantiate. But we're not selling anything here, right? We're not pitching. We're really just presenting the facts. This is what we're doing. This is where the market is, and here are the evidence, right? Okay. Any questions so far before we move on? Yes.
You mentioned about the ABN. I think you said New South Wales ABN, but the ABN is actually national.
Yep, so the critical points would be registered office address and principal place of operations, and then the residency of the major office holders. Those would constitute.
Yes, but what I'm saying on your screen, I thought it said New South Wales ABN, and my point is that the ABN is national.
Good pickup, thank you.
And what I suggest to anybody here is doing an application, make sure your ABN details and your ASIC details are up to date, because sometimes you tell the accountant you've moved, but the girl who gets the ASIC printout doesn't know, and then the ASIC thing may be totally incorrect because
absolutely
there is a slip up at the chartered
absolutely
accountant's office. So then anybody can look up a company for $10, any company, and you find out who the directors and the shareholders are. So rather than try and use the ASIC website, it's a particularly bad website. You probably just pay $10
to get the record. Or if you're an office holder, you can log into ASIC and you just print it with that.
The ASIC website is particularly difficult to use.
The office holders log in, right?
And it was very, very difficult.
Yep, totally. That's why you need to engage with a good accountant. Yes.
Thanks so much for this presentation. It really giving a lot of context for this specific application. I guess like from how I'm seeing it, it does seem like it's quite strict. So I guess relative to other types of programs, maybe from startup space. At least how I'm seeing it, do you think this is friendly to kind of like first time? Or I guess my question is, what type of profile do you usually see for businesses applying to this? Because it seems like it's more for like maybe a second round business, someone that's already got something going, and then maybe they're going into a new space and they have more cash, they have more proven records. Since you mentioned like you need an accountant, you need a lot of asset registry, a lot of business statements, and a co-contribution. That seems like something with someone that has a lot more going for them versus someone that's like really starting from scratch and trying to get into this program.
Sure, yeah. That's an executive decision any individual has to make. Everyone's different, right? Some people, they are more opportunistic, they want to give it a go. Why not? Some people are more conservative, they want to get it right before they do anything. Equally fine. It's a very personal decision. But what I would suggest is, look at the guidelines to see, there are hard things where if you're not, you're not. Like if you one of the directors is not in New South Wales, and that's a hard rule. And if that's the case, then I wouldn't waste your time, right? Or you have to wait for the next round because they said you can change the directorship. They can move to New South Wales. We don't mind that, but it needs to be 6 months before prior to the submission.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. Given that most micro businesses would only have one director, and in fact 20 years ago you used to have two, and to protect the partner who is not in business, they changed to one director companies. I understand some accountants are setting up companies with two directors, but that is very risky for the spouse who doesn't involved in the company.
Yep.
So where you said you had to have 51% majority directors being female, is that what I read?
For Stream 2, one of the criteria, yes.
So if you are a male director and you are the only director, I presume you don't meet the criteria.
Then you don't fit Stream 2.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a joke. I actually applied email one. I'm not joking. And you see me, right? I applied one, got rejected because they asked me to prove I'm a female. I'm not kidding. So it took me 3 months to prove I'm female to them.
I don't know how they do it. Yeah, I'm not. I don't have transparency into how they verify, directorships and gender, right? Yeah.
I've got a couple questions, but the main one is that part of the application, in terms of proving, it asks about milestones of what your company is going to set out to achieve in the next either quarter, half year, full year. I don't know how you can define milestones because it's an open narrative question. So that's something that I was stuck with because I can only see...
I'll answer that first.
Yes,
okay? This is, again, a common misconception. It's not about your company. It's about a project that you put forward for the purpose of the grant application. You are applying for funding to fulfill a particular project, which means it would already have a starting point and an end point in mind. And you know exactly what the activities needs to be done to get from this A to B. And that's why they want 3 milestones. And it's administrative as well because they pay out the grant in 3 tranches. So that's why they want you to have 3 milestones so it's easier from an administrative perspective, which is fair enough.
Thank you for clarifying that. That
Sure.
makes a lot more sense now. So I can segregate, take out stuff that does not relate to the grant and actually only focus on what this grant money is going to be put towards.
To take your solution
and
from
just
one
from
TRL
point
to
A
another.
Another TRL.
Yeah.
Okay, that
That's
makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, I had the second question.
You want one question? Okay.
Go on.
I guess my question's based around the data in terms of the number of applications that are put in against the number of acceptances, and also the length of time it takes to get the approval, because clearly everything's dynamic in terms of investors coming on board, in terms of getting your MVP ready, et cetera, et cetera. So really the time it takes and the success rate overall?
I don't have the actual numbers because I don't work in the department, and even if I do, I don't think I am allowed to tell you. Okay, but I don't. Okay, but give or take. Okay, working backwards. If you look at the budget allocation, roughly 20 to 25 companies will get funded, each round, and I don't know how many actually, is submitted. But I would believe, from past experience, it's in the hundreds, not 100s, but hundreds. That would be roughly the odds. It's still what we're talking like it's 8%, 7%. Much higher than venture capital, actually. From a timing perspective, totally understand it's very frustrating for a lot of people, unfortunately. But two parts of my to my response, but I'll answer the question of the timing. Looking at what round one has told us, right? We submitted round one, September, October last year, and they've only got approved a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Not fully announced. I think they had a newsletter announcing a few of them, but not the full list of the 20X or 19, 18, whatever the number is, successful applicants. So that's roughly what you are expecting. And we're going to have an election next year. That's gonna delay things a little bit as well. But we never know. And I guess my point is, while it's very frustrating, as an entrepreneur, my experience is never rely on government grant on investment to build your business. That's risky. Right? You build a business because there's an commercial opportunity, and if the commercial opportunity is real, then there are a lot of different ways to get to that. But that's for another day.
So it's about 6 months.
I would say so. From.
In terms of where we are with AI, it's not worth anybody.
Yep. We can all have our opinions. Yes.
So just to extend on that, does that mean that even if we apply and are successful, that we well may have accomplished the milestones by the time we find out if we're successful, so we just take the cash and say thank you?
There's a possibility, yes. Yes.
We don't have to hold.
Don't hold, I would say.
Okay, Jonathan, good to see you. Thank you for the overview. Just going on from that last point, is it that the last couple of points actually about the lead time before the funding lands? Obviously, it's too long to put a project that is an imminent project on ice. You're permitted to start the project before the approval, or you?
Okay. I can
because in
interpret.
previous.
I can interpret what the guideline says.
Yeah.
Okay. The guideline says eligible expenditure will not start until a funding agreement is being signed reciprocally. That's the rule.
Okay, so really you shouldn't participate in any activities that fall under the or within the scope of the project before the funding agreement is signed.
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for this. This is really helpful. I'm just thinking, from a perspective of, is there certain specific industries or problems you're trying to solve, or your startup is trying to solve, or your technology readiness level, which actually makes or breaks, your grant application?
Not that I'm aware of. You still. Competitive assessment criteria are innovation, commercialization. One of the sub-points about commercialization is industry policy mission alignment, and then you've got deliverability at the third criteria. Okay, last one before last question for now, and I just want to go through something with you.
Does an accountant have to sign off on tax compliance, in particular lodgement of income tax returns, BAS's payment as super?
For the purpose of the grant, the only thing that is required from the accountant is the accountant's declaration. It needs to be signed.
But what kind of nature does that take?
There's a template online which lists out all of the things that the accountant needs to go through. Yeah.
Because I'm interested, because if the person hasn't done a tax return for 3 years, you know, if I'm the government, I wouldn't want to be giving them any funding.
Good point.
You know.
Those are the kind of things. That's why they're asking for statutory accounts for the last 3 financial years. I think that's a fair point. Yeah. Okay. Well, how can you get help with this only 14 days? And you know, in the past couple of years, when every round is open, I just get bombarded with LinkedIn connection, you know, phone calls, whatnot, emails, and asking if I can help with their application. I would love to help everyone, but I can't. Physically, I just can't. Each round is, what, 29 days? I just couldn't, you know, by the time I understand your business, like, it's too late, right? So what I've done is I have created a set of tools, which is self-serve. So I imparted all of their experiences, and insights, and observations that as much as I can, and shovel into those tools. Hopefully, it will benefit the community. And I just want to take this opportunity to very quickly run through this. I know we are right at time, but it's a 3-step process. It's very tailored and designed to the specifications of the MVP Ventures program according to the guidelines. So the first step is really just asking you a few very, very you know, standard questions about, you know, is your company in New South Wales? Do you turn over more than $400,000? So that give or take will lead you to, you know, either a yes or no kind of thing. So you can very, very quickly self-select out. Because if you're a sole trader, for example, some people are not aware that as a sole trader you cannot apply. And so simple things like that. I'm just trying to, you know, build a tool to, as quickly as possible, help founders to identify themselves out. You know, not spending time is equally, you know, valuable than actually getting the money. Okay, and then once you pass the kind of like the initial structural alignment, you will unlock the next tool, which is the risk review, which has a deep dive into the eligibility. Like, you can upload your asset record and I do the analysis for you. There's a budget calculator where you can slide around and play around with the budget, so you know exactly the eligible expenditure are compliant, et cetera, et cetera. And once you have kind of verified that you qualify for, let's say, Stream 1, and you're in pretty good shape in all of the other compliance elements, then you unlock the Pro Strategy Lab, which is essentially just an AI me trying to workshop various different categories of the applications we've got. I can show you some screenshots here. So this is the first tool where you fill in 4 questions, and either there are structural blockers, and we tell you why, or there's no structural blockers, which means you can proceed to the next stage and you unlock the next product, which is the risk review. And in the risk review, you know, this is one of the examples of, you know, after you upload your asset record, we analyze all of their, you know, directorship, your office locations, whether this it has been 6 months or not, or whether you just changed your directorship yesterday so that they're now living in New South Wales, and female ownership, et cetera, et cetera. And evidence on code contribution, you know, instead of you going out to the public website to search for it, I have loaded the database in here so you can search against it. And it tells you exactly, based on your stream, how much match funding you actually require to show in the balance. And then a budget calculator as a slider. They have certain compliance you know, restrictions on it. You can't spend more than $4,000 on travel, et cetera, and then that's going to impact your overall budget. And your innovation scorecard, which is your starting URL and your ending URL as a project, whether it's reasonable, whether there are, you know, obvious blockers, like you're developing an internal tool which you don't intend to sell, you know, to other customers, that kind of thing. So that's the eligibility kind of risk review compliance gaps identification product. And then once you pass all of that, ideally, you want all four sections to be green, which means you are, by and large, now you know, eligible. Then it unlocks the Pro Strategy AI, which you can work with an AI JC to you know, on all of these different areas. Yeah, obviously, you have the innovation, commercialization, and deliverability as the competitive assessment criteria. But then I also have specific subcategories here, which are quite a critical and large part of the application. And for each category, what you do is I'll ask you a few questions, and then the AI actually analyzes it, and always will output those three things, identify weaknesses, and when I put my assessor hat on, what I would still be hesitant on from your narrative and the information that you've provided, and possible some advice on how to strengthen that section. And you can use this tool, as an iterative process to kind of test different assumptions, put different narratives in to see what kind of elements are missing or which elements are working really well, and you want to strengthen it further. And it's designed to be perpetual. So it's designed to be pedantic about and very critical about what you put in, and it will never spit out and say, "Hey, now you're ready to apply." No, it will never say that. It's just a coach really working hard with you on a particular narrative on all of these sections. So that's my tool. I just want to put it in front of you. We've got 14 days. I can't help everyone. I'm already full loaded, but hopefully that's valuable to everyone. And if we have more time, we can have one or two more questions. Otherwise, we can wrap up. Seems like we do have.
We do have to close up soon, but I just wanted to say a massive thank you to John as well. Can we just give him a round of applause?
Thank you.
Let's have time for one more question, maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll just.
Okay, since they've both got their hands up, so last two.
Can I just ask about confidentiality? Obviously, this is innovation. So confidentiality, as far as you know it, inside the application process, and then also with your firm.
Very good question. I hadn't really thought about that from my tool's perspective. It was really, I was just trying to help everyone, and not everyone has to use it, but it is what it is.
Okay, we'll speak to the government process then. Can we send all this information about innovation and our development pathway?
I'm pretty sure the government has kind of their own Commonwealth or state-based confidentiality. It's probably hidden somewhere in the term, so I would suggest you have a look at that. But good point. I haven't really thought about that because it's a very short window of time, 30 days, and that's a good point. Something I would be thinking about too. Thank you.
Yep. Just a quick question, but for this grant, is there any fit with social enterprises and non-for-profit? Because their commercialization strategy would be a bit different. Let's say it's something in education, and I have a letter of intent with the New South Wales education, and they want to roll out to all the schools, right? Is that something that still fits in this, or is it a bit too...
As a for-profit company serving nonprofits or nonprofits, doing R&D internally and trying to commercialize the product?
Basically, non-for-profit trying to kind of commercialize
I don't think they're eligible looking at the eligible structures. I think it needs to be incorporated, but not our public company by limited guarantee. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that clarification.
No worries. All right, that's a wrap.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you so much, everyone.
So good. I'll just encourage everyone to follow Jonathan on LinkedIn. Probably a good place to start. Do you have any newsletter or anything like that people can follow, or?
LinkedIn, it's probably the best channel to connect. And I do constantly post, grant-related stuff, startup-related stuff on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And on that note, keep your eye out on the Luma page, the UTS Startups page. We'll hopefully be bringing a lot more events like this one to this venue. If you have any event ideas that are around tech, startups, education, interesting sort of topics that you'd like to bring and run events in this space, come and speak to myself. If you're interested in UTS Startups, there's a few QR codes around the room that will help you kind of learn a little bit more. And if you're also interested to win one-year event experience for today, we have our first kickoff event for Fridays at UTS with the CEO, co-founder of Karma coming up next, talking about global equities, expansion across competitive markets, and a lot of really interesting insights. So stick around for that. If you're interested in a tour of UTS Startups, raise your hand and we can take you upstairs and show you around the space. Otherwise, thank you again so much for coming. Jonathan's going to be around for a little bit longer.
Sure.
And then that's a wrap for this one. But we will need the room to reset a little bit. So thank you very much.